All right. Here's what I wanted to say though. Let me. What is this? Oh, let's get this off this. Okay, so let's talk about levels of tank healing. Okay, so the question is, where should it be? Okay, where should it be? Let's have a. Let's do this. Let's have a. Does this work? This is gonna get weird. Okay, let's have a scale. Okay, what is? Let's call it levels of tank healing. So where on this spectrum, we'll call it, should we be? Okay, so let's call this level 1, okay? Healer heals tank, literally 0 globals. Only passive stuff like F-flow, only passive stuff. I'll try and give heavy examples across multiple classes. Healer heals tank, literally 0 globals. So this would be like only F-flow, wild growth, right, for druid. This would be like literally nothing for paladin, or like random wog sometimes. For mistweaver, it would only be fist weaving. Literally nothing, right? Like shaman would be like healing rain, chain heals, totems. Is beacon not a thing? Well, we're at level 1, right? We're at level 1. Is this how it should be right here? So let's say like level 2, okay? Level 2 is like maintenance. Did I spell that right? I'm gonna say maint healing from healer. So rare globals or resources, right? Okay, so let's say this is level 2. Okay, so by this I mean now the druid has to life bloom, right? The druid has to life bloom. He's not really doing anything else, but at least he has to maintain life bloom on the tank. Mistweaver, like, at least has to press renewing mist on CD. The shaman is pressing earth shield, riptide. The paladin has to put beacon. This is like barely... Okay, so this is sort of my point, and again, I'm not trying to argue with the why are we worried about tanks thing. This is mainly what I'm trying to say, right? Right now, let's call this level 1. This is level 2. Generally speaking, right now, in Dragonflight, Season 3 and 4, we're literally here, right? We are like here and then sometimes here. This is the range that we're at right now in terms of tank healing, where most of the dungeon, we're not even using Life Bloom on the tank. Anybody who's played Paladin or Druid knows, right? There's this right here, right? But this is still not healing, right? This is still like, you know, not putting any globals. So then we'll expand it out all the way, right? Of 3, how would we describe 3? Additional, we'll say additional / resources globals, but not spamming. Okay, so this would be like using Send Ward and Rejuve as a druid. You're not spamming healing him, but you're like just having Life Bloom and F-flow isn't enough, and you're having to use Send Ward and Rejuve, right? Paladin, maybe you're keeping Holy Shock and spending some wogs. Shaman, you're like actually using your undulation procs maybe, or you're like, you know, using other totems and on the tank. See, trying to think of other examples. I guess that's it. That's enough. Mistweaver. I mean, Mistweaver's hard because of the way Mistweaver works, right? Mistweaver archetype is like weird. Some of the class archetypes are like really weird for this, right? And this is where you get into like, you know, and then basically, then the last level would be just spamming bombing heals into the tank, right? Just spamming regrowth, 5 globals in a row, every holy power plus holy shock, you know, Dispriest spamming Shadow Mend or Flash of Light, right? Just like heal. I mean, this is basically what Cataclysm healing is. Like, if you're talking about Cataclysm or like Classic WoW, this is what you do in Classic WoW. Like, there's literally pulls in Classic WoW where I go into the pull, I spend 15 globals healing the tank, and then 5 other globals doing random shit, and then I'm done. I would say, at least my impression, I think, is they're here, and they're sort of like moving this goalpost. They're sort of like moving this goalpost to here. Right now, Dragonflight is here, where healer is healing the tank literally 0. Only random passive healing is healing them. And I would say that in some times, but even this, right? This is sort of what I'm saying when I'm talking about the Ellismere thing to Dorky or whatever, is when the tank needs help, if it's like, oh, Meladruce is hard or whatever, this is literally what I'm doing. Like, I'm literally moving Earthen Shield and Riptide over here, or I'm moving Life Bloom over, right? Because generally speaking, these resources in most situations you can't give away. But like on Meladrusa, this is really, really hard to give away. Even this sometimes is hard to give away on Meladrusa. If we're talking about Tyrant or whatever, like just giving away your Earth Shields, give away your Life Blooms, your Beacons, like this is a lot of healing that you're giving away to classes that might need them. And so this is sort of what I see is them moving the goalposts. The idea of these resources, so talking about like bottoming out your holy power, spending your undulations, using your send wards, this is stuff that I'm only using if there's 0 AoE damage, right? So this is basically Dragonflight right now, 0 AoE damage. I would say this is Dragonflight and this is War Within, right? Right now, Dragonflight, this is the absolute standard. Not having Life Bloom on your tank, not having Beacon, not using Earth Shield, literally using it on 2 DPS or yourself and a DPS is what you do with all these classes. And then maybe on a hard tank moments, give them a Life Bloom or Earth Shield or whatever. Like for instance, Azure Vault. There's no reason you can't keep Life Bloom or Earth Shield or Beacon on your tank in Azure Vault for like the whole time. Except for like maybe like the frog area, assuming that you're not doing cheese or whatever. Here is basically 0 AoE damage. A lot of Azure Vault is also this, only because you can, right? Only because there's literally 0 AoE damage do you use Send Word, all this stuff on the tank. So Azure Vault is mostly in a 3, but if there was any damage in this dungeon at all that was threatening in any of the pulls, like for instance, if you're in a pug and the Lasher casts are going off and like, you might not be able to do this. If Lasher casts are going off, there's no way you're spending your resources healing the tank. You are doing infinite AoE healing every CD, like trying to stay alive. The only reason you're doing these sorts of things on the tank is because there's 0 AoE damage. And I think this is like rare or with certain tanks. Now I think what they want it to be is wait, where did that go? Rare certain tanks. So now I think like, okay, let's say you have a Blood Decay, right? If you have a Blood Decay, you can get away with not putting your Life Bloom on them sometimes, right? Or not putting your Beacon on them. Not all the times, but some of the times. Prot Warrior, you're basically permanently Beacon on them, right? So then this, I think, is like average. And I think this is the big difference here, is they want you to constantly have to maintain your main tank healing on the tank. Earth Shield, Life Bloom, this is not meant to be on a DPS 24/7, is what they think. I'm not saying, right, you know, what it is, what it should be. I'm just saying this is their mindset, right? And then this is basically hard tank moments. This is what hard tank moments should be. And then this is like rare / tank sucks. Either maybe there's certain encounters where there's like 0 going on, but a ton of tank damage, or your tank is just Omega Beans, right? I think we all agree that we should never, ever go to here, or very, very rarely should we get into here. And I think people are looking at, and why I like try and fight back into it is I think everyone just thinks immediately we're going to level 4, right? Everyone says we're going to level 4 immediately when they read the Blizzard notes, right? But I think level 4 generally, and I don't think anyone thinks that we should be in level 4 where we're just sitting here spamming healing on the tank, unless, you know, your tank is making some critical mistakes, or it's like a very specific pull. You're fighting one boss that all he does is put like a giant tank bleed, and then you have to heal the tank. This is where I think it should be, and this is like what it feels like, but this is just like a little weird, right? Because it sort of ruins the specialty of certain tanks in certain moments, because this is just the standard. This is definitely, but here's the problem, right? And then again, the problem is, okay, let's say there's a hard tank moment. Right now, if there's a hard tank moment, you know, okay, let's put Earth Shield on them, let's put Life Bloom on them, that's fine, we'll try and deal with it. In the War Within, if there can be a hard tank moment plus a ton of AoE damage, there can be a moment where this is really hard for your tank, he's using all of his buttons correctly and he still needs help, and your group is taking a ton of damage too. And this is where like people are saying, what am I supposed to do here? And I agree with this. Like, this is pretty scary. And I think the biggest culprit of this is the 80% health tank busters. Like, if your team is rotting out and you're struggling keeping your tank at a certain level, like for instance the first boss of Stone Vault, you should not have to worry about your tank getting one shot from 80% health. That's just ridiculous. To me, there shouldn't be insane hard tank moments and a bunch of AoE damage very frequently. But there are. And this is sort of the problem as well. And part of what Dorky's saying in this part right here, right, of the encounter design doesn't match the tank nerfs. If they are doing this, right, if they're saying, okay, you need to keep your maintenance healing on the tank, and in certain times you're going to need to use your additional resources on the tank, well, then the healer needs to be able to AoE heal without all of these things. You need to be able to AoE heal without your Life Bloom, without your Send Ward, without your Undulation procs, right? You need some way to be able to keep everyone everyone alive without these things. And right now it just feels like there's just too much damage and a lot of times that you just really can't. Again, why are we worrying about this? I don't know. Like, is this the biggest problem in WoW? Absolutely no. Like, should we have just sat here? Should we just sat in this world? I mean, probably, right? Like, probably we should fix other things. Probably we should go to a different MS Paint scenario here and not be on this screen. While this could be a little bit improved gameplay, because this is the other side of the argument too that I don't bring up, but I think is very, very important, is when you have to speak for the people, right? Okay, there's one part in here that I didn't address. It is, what happens if your tank sucks? What happens if your healer sucks? Right? What happens if your healer doesn't even know these resources? What happens if your healer goes Send Ward? I don't have a weak aura for Send Ward. I haven't used that in 30 minutes. Now this whole thing gets thrown out the window, right? And this is the problem, is this sort of mashes all together when you're forcing AoE damage on everybody and your tank sucks, and so you need to keep Life Bloom on him anyway, even though there's 0 damage, because he's healing negative and he's mitigating negative. So this is the other problem with it, is this assumes this is me playing with Dorky or me playing with Greg or Yoda, where they're pressing all of their buttons right 99% of the time. They're mitigating the correct things. They know what's going on in the dungeon. If you have a tank that's, you know, mouth breathing and drooling all over his keyboard and has no idea what's going on, and then on top of this, what tanks are saying too, to give you the reverse, the tank is saying, well, what happens if you have a healer that's mouth breathing and doesn't know what's going on? Like, again, I'm looking at it from a perspective like, okay, here's me, right? And then these are all the levels. This is how I'm allocating my healing, right? But what happens when you're the tank and then this is your healer? You're the tank and then here's your healer. This is your healer's levels. You're in the dungeon and then it's going from a level 2 to a level 3 and then this is your healer, right? I can understand why this might be a little bit frustrating, and you're like, well, this is what he's thinking about in this scenario. And again, it is a very nice monkey. It is a very nice monkey, but so again, I don't mean to be trying to convince anybody of anything or try and say one thing is right or wrong. I'm just trying to share like exactly what I think about the key. Okay, let's we got a thing here. We'll read this here too. Healer here, I pug a lot, typically to title range, and I'll find a group to finish off with. Okay, we're going to assume he's finishing off the title there. I've pugged a lot of keys since I started playing in BFA. This change is going to significantly impact lower end keys, probably more than higher end keys. I don't like the conjecture. I don't want to hear what he thinks. I just kind of want to hear what his experience is, right? People who are newer to tanking will still struggle significantly more, but one thing I've noticed a lot of pug healers is that they aren't very good. Hold on, is this Photoshop? What is this? Like, what? I feel like this just isn't really fair. Like, okay, your argument for why the tank changes are bad can't just be because healer sucks. It's bolded? I mean, bro, is this, all right, one, if this is a legitimate reason, two, if this is bull. What do you guys think? The reason that the changes are bad is because healers suck? Like, come on, really? So that's what we're getting to now, that healer is just the passenger role. And if you're like, healers are just expected to suck. What is my experience? My experience is everyone sucks. Do pug healers heal Jangby? I mean, my experience is everybody sucks. My experience isn't that, oh, all these players are way better except for the healer and this guy's a mouth-breathing idiot. Like, my experience is everybody sucks. That's his point. Well, okay, I'll continue reading. If you have a bad tank and a good healer, you still have a high chance of bricking the key. If you have a good tank and a bad healer, you still have a high chance of bricking the key. If you have a bad tank and a bad healer, it's GG on the first boss. Not to mention the new plus 15-second penalty for death. Okay, so hold on. Let me... Okay, I would just prefer to hear more about his experience and less about his theory, right? So he's saying what happens if there's bad healers. He's the healer. Is he saying that, like, what is he saying he is? Like, what does he mean if you have a good tank and a bad healer? Like, how does he know what that's like? If he's the healer and he's going into keys and how does he know what it's like to be in a group with a bad healer and a good tank? I guess I don't understand what this means. He plays AUG? That's what he means by healer. World's first non-delusional healer. Bro, look, all I'm saying is, like, to me, this is just, like, made up, oh, this is what I think is going to happen in his head, right? Versus experience. Healers won't be able to carry as easily now, and neither will tanks. Good players and teams will find a way to adapt to this quickly versus pugs who will be forever lost, not knowing who failed their task. Dude, I actually hard disagree with like everything this guy says. Bro, what does it matter who failed? What does this even mean? Like, oh, you can sleep better at night knowing that your tank was dog shit and it was his fault? What do you mean forever knowing who failed? Like, what is he saying? He's very right. I mean, as a healer who has carried and babysat many keys simply because of PlaySafe Big IO, I think I will certainly benefit from this change, as other players will now be able to discern a good healer from a great one. But the community as a whole, especially in the lower end, in my opinion, will suffer significantly more. I don't know. This guy is based. I don't know where to start about this. Okay, first of all, we're talking about Mythic Plus with a scaling difficulty, right? So like, eventually you're going to get to the point where you suck ass and you're not good enough to do keys and you cannot continue on, or you need to get better, right? Like, is that not the case? Like, eventually you're going to hit a point, right? So look, I'll leave it as is. The man spoke his truth, or the woman, or the whatever, he spoke his truth. I think to say, I just think a lot of the things that he's talking about is like not relevant. Oh, now it's harder to carry your team. People are so delusional with how they think they're carrying. If you're hard stuck at a key level, like, I don't know. If you think you're just like Omega hard carrying keys. Okay, I just picture, like, no offense to that Blood DK that we played with in that last pug, because he played fine. But like, the guy who's like rattling off all of the mechanics in party chat and like, oh, this is the pull I'm doing, we're doing it like this. That's the guy in my mind that in his head, he's like, yeah, I just carried those shitters. Tank is so hard and all these other roles are so easy and everyone still sucks and I just carried them, right? That's the sort of impression that I get from that, whereas like, while what he did was fine, like, he didn't really need to do any of that, right? Like, none of that was necessary or required, or arguably some would say didn't even help. I don't know, it's just a weird thing. But I don't necessarily like where, you know, this guy's coming from. Like, some arguments that I could get behind are, one of the nice things is that when tanks require no healing, you don't need to know about all the different tanks. Having to learn what a Vengeance Demon Hunter does and what a Blood DK does and what a Bear does creates a lot of problems, because WoW is already complicated as with 90 million spells, and when you get a healer, when you're playing a tank that's not so popular like Blood DK, and or you know, and then you get a healer that doesn't know how Blood DK works, and they're like, why is your health going everywhere? Like, what the, that creates really weird moments where having tanks just be invulnerable smooths that out. If, you know, you can just go into a key and just assume that your tank is going to keep themselves alive and not worry about that much, right? So that's like an argument I could get behind for pugging. You know, like maybe like gear or like player power level, like healers are generally the most under geared because no one ever wants to play healer. We're always taking healers that are under geared, and then they're already struggling with all the AoE damage, and putting more demand on them is going to make things harder. And like, it isn't fun when you get heal checked and you would rather have more control over the key. Like, those sorts of things I could get behind, but like, oh, I can't carry the key anymore, or like, I don't know. I just don't necessarily, I'm not on board with some of this reasoning. I think the things that Dorky brought up are like the most reasonable, in terms of like tank busters being ridiculous, needing to play AUG in every single key, and then like, yeah, I mean, basically those two I think are like really the nastiest ones. But in general, hopefully like my explanation of how much healing a tank is getting. And like, in terms of resources, right, I think the biggest thing is there's so much more AoE damage going on that those resources that a healer gets are like more limited, and they can't necessarily give them up. For example, Resto Druid is pretty strict on the resources that you have. Basically, Efflow and Wild Growth are going on everybody. Rejuve, you're never pressing. So when it comes to your healing, right, you have your Life Blooms, and then you have your Send Word, and then that's basically it. Oh yeah, your regrowth proc, sorry. But I mean, even regrowth procs are like kind of AoE healing. And so, you know, what can I give to the tank? I can give him Life Bloom, and I can give him Send Word and Regrowth, but like, that's basically it, right? And even not just Regrowth, just the procs, really, right? And like, even then, you don't even want to really Regrowth somebody who has Life Bloom on them most of the time, because they're already getting, you know what I mean? Like, you're giving away so much of your resources, because that's all you have, right? Is your Regrowths, your Life Blooms, and then your Send Word. So like, if you're giving everything to the tank during AoE damage, you're just doing no healing. All the AoE heals just heal for like nothing or whatever, unless you're like piling all of your other stuff. You have Riptides out, you have your Earth Shields out, you have your Life Blooms, all that. healers are HPS monkeys. I do agree with that 100%. The main issue that I have is the window that I have to heal is so small. For instance, when there's a chill storm, I have like 4 seconds to do the healing and that's it. I need to have all that stuff set up before the chill storm even happens and then be regrowthing like twice during the chill storm and then that's it. I have to have all the stuff set up. Like it's not like, okay, chill storm's happening, I'm gonna put life bloom on the DPS now. It's like that needed to be already there before the chill storm even started because all the damage is like so heavy and so bursty. But I mean, again, like I agree, like we need to see a little bit of a decrease in AoE damage to see if we want more healing to move to the tank, then we need the healing to move away from the DPS, and we're not necessarily seeing that right now. I feel like this tank versus healer talk distracts from the encounter design and balance. That's a core issue. Yeah, I think balance especially is a little bit questionable right now, but you know, the best we can do is just prage. Say your pragers. Well, that was a nice little random yap. I mean, people were asking about it, whatever. Maybe we'll turn that into like a YouTube video or whatever. Maybe we'll send that over to Feb for something to do. Yapped and talked about tank stuff. What a peaceful... Can you change this background, by the way? How does this background work? I mean, I'm assuming you're going to be able to like buy backgrounds or whatever, right?